Unit 16, Gateway. The potential for market enforcement is greater when contracting parties have developed reputational capital that can be devalued when contracts are violated. Farmers and landowners develop reputations for honesty, fairness, producing high yields, and consistently demonstrating that they are good at what they do. In small, close-knit farming communities, reputations are well known. Over time, landowners indirectly monitor farmers by observing the reported output, the general quality of the soil, and any unusual or extreme behavior. Farmer and landowner reputations act as a bond. In any growing season, a farmer can reduce effort, overuse soil, or underreport the crop. Similarly, a landowner can undermaintain fences, ditches, and irrigation systems. Accurate assessments of farmer and landowner behavior will be made over time, and those farmers and landowners who attempt to gain at each other's expense will find that others may refuse to deal with them in the future. Exercises. Number 1. Athletic performance is not the only impact that our changing climate has on sports. The impact on hockey has the National Hockey League concerned. Traditionally, many young Canadians learn to play hockey while skating on frozen ponds during the winter months. However, as temperatures rise globally, ponds once suitable for hockey no longer have enough ice to support skating. Some do not freeze at all, and those that do freeze maintain ice thick enough for play for much shorter periods of time each winter. This means that young people have less access and opportunity to learn and play hockey outdoors. This may translate into fewer players and even fewer fans of the sport. Moreover, young players learning the sport will be forced to do so in indoor venues, which are much more expensive and harder to access than traditional outdoor play. Thus, it will become much more difficult for talented players growing up in rural areas and/or in poor families to learn to play the sport at a professional level. This may turn hockey into a sport largely inaccessible by the economically disadvantaged. Number 2. Ageism reflects the inequality between the old and the young, with the society placing a higher value on the young. This may explain why even older people themselves seem bothered by growing old. An American food company once tried to market dietetic food to older persons under the name Senior Foods. It turned out to be a complete failure. A perceptive observer explained, "People didn't want to be seen eating the stuff. It was labeling them old. And in our society, it is still an embarrassment to be old." The bottom line is that American culture is youth-oriented, which makes older people feel bad about their age. This feeling may further be related to the biological and psychological processes of aging. But social forces, such as society's tendency to define older persons as a national burden rather than a national treasure, play an important role as well. These social forces can worsen or diminish the biological and psychological aging. Moreover, the experience of aging varies within the United States and around the world, involves being subjected to prejudice and discrimination, and is misused to generate the myths of aging. Number 3. One important way in which our culture enhances our ability to survive and thrive in the world is by passing along the tools it has created to make our daily living more effective and efficient. Some tools are actual physical objects. For example, hammers help us build houses, and scissors can cut paper and cloth. But many others are cognitive tools that enable us to think in more productive ways. Cognitive tools take a variety of forms, including concepts, symbols, strategies, procedures, and any other culturally constructed mechanisms that help us tackle life's mental challenges more efficiently and effectively. For example, our system of numbers allows us to perform precise calculations related to building construction, engine design, and cooking. The maps we create help us find our way around new cities, subway systems, and shopping malls. Our writing system allows us to record our thoughts on paper or in computer documents. By the way, computers are cognitive tools as well as physical ones because they help us think in increasingly sophisticated ways. All of these tools are cultural creations, the results of many, many years of our collective ingenuity and meaning-making. Number 4. Under the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, organic standards, animal products such as meat, milk, and eggs must meet certain minimum requirements to win an organic label. However, critics say the government standards are not strict enough to ensure that farm animals are raised, transported, and slaughtered in a humane way. The USDA regulations, for example, provide that animals must have access to the outdoors, including access to pasture for cud-chewing animals such as cattle and sheep. Critics say opening a barn door just minutes per day, however, might meet this definition, and organic animals may never get to walk freely around an outdoor range or pasture. Instead, like most conventionally raised farm animals, organically raised animals may live in very confined, close quarters throughout their lives. To solve this problem, some animal producers are adding other labels to their foods, such as open pasture or pasture raised, to indicate that animals are raised in a pasture rather than fattened in a confined facility. Consumers, however, must be cautious of some labels that seem to suggest humane conditions. Designations such as free-range, cage-free, or grass-fed do not necessarily guarantee that animals are not confined or raised in the outdoors. Number 5. If you had been walking around Philadelphia in the summer of 1787 and had come across Independence Hall, you would have encountered something strange. The street in front of the meeting hall where many of the nation's founders were assembled to draft the U.S. Constitution was filled with a gigantic mound of dirt. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention had ordered the construction of this earthen noise barrier. They believed the sounds of carriages, street sellers, and conversations outside would disturb their intense deliberation and writing. They weren't going for a monastic silence. As the historical records show, there were plenty of bitter vocal disagreements. Given the social mores of the day, there might have been occasional moments of emotional release through yelling or throwing things at one another. Still, there was an underlying recognition of the need for a quiet container in which to do difficult thinking as a group. The big dirt mound was an effort to make this possible. Number 6. Encoding is the term that is most often used to describe the way in which information is put into memory. Once an object, item, or event has been attended to, or in some cases, even if it is not being attended to, it is a valid candidate for encoding into memory. The encoding process creates a mental representation based on the amount of effort and detail that was processed via attention. For example, suppose you are shopping at a farmer's market for a winter squash. Each squash you see is given some low level of processing, so that what is encoded into memory is the experience of seeing many squashes. This relatively shallow encoding will result in relatively weak memory traces. However, if you happen to see a squash that was unusually shaped or very large, or that really caught your attention in some way, you might encode with more effort and detail. And this would likely result in a stronger memory trace for that specific squash.